Hey there world, this is Draken, and today I'm going to be going over the raid, and more specifically the next raids that we'll be going through, because you might be wondering to yourself at this point, you've already done this current raid a huge amount of times, and you're probably wondering which units should I be building up next for the upcoming raids, which are going to be Siren and Glacial, or Glacial. Glacial is, I think, how you pronounce that. Those will be the two upcoming raids, and I believe we will be getting the Siren raid first. And the main reason I believe that is because I know for the Glacial raid we will have King Mont by that time, and I don't believe we're getting him right away. He's coming after the EX system comes out, and this raid does not have him, I think, out at that time. It does have Niv Love though, and she is the main unit recommended for this, and she is the one who is currently out on our game. So I believe her banner is still going. So if you're wondering if you should pull for her or not, you might want to, just because of the simple fact that she is probably the best unit for that. Unless, of course, we're past that banner. Ooh, we are on the last day of her banner. So there's probably not much point in pulling for her at this point, but if you did get her, she is going to be one of the best units against Siren, because she was basically made for the Siren raid. She is an electric archer, and that is what this raid boss is weak to. Incredibly weak to, in fact. So for the Siren raid, this page here, warofthevisions.info, has pretty much everything you need to know about it. It's going to be weak to lightning and missiles, so of course Nivlov is the top recommended unit. And this seems to be the new standard, that all the bosses seem to be immune to time steal, which, you know, that's probably because it worked so well in the last one, and it is immune to slash resistance debuff and elemental resistances debuffs. So you're going to see a lot less of the slashing teams in this raid, but I know for a fact there's still going to be people trying to do the 4 Orlandos, because why would they stop doing that? AoE skills have 50% chance to sleep. That changes depending on what your faith is, so it might be lower, but the actual rate she has is 50%. So I assume if you have max faith, this is what you'll be getting hit with, or maybe it'll be higher than that. 260 luck, so pretty good for dodging. Weak to blind, but that doesn't really matter because she uses 3 magic skills and they're not affected by blind, so if your strategy is to try to blind them, it won't really work very well. And they have 70 bravery or faith in the Japan version right now, which might affect, well, actually it won't really affect much because all you can really do is blind her. She's immune to everything else for debuffs there. And max health fully upped is pretty high. I think this raid goes up to 100 even. It might only go up to 80, but I believe it goes to 100. The 2 top recommended units, of course, are going to be Frederica and Niv Love, for the simple fact that they are both missile and lightning. On top of those units, though, if you are doing a missile comp, I would recommend these other 2 here, Lucia and Mustadio. The reason being, this Lucia just has the, quadruple shot, which is huge, and Mustadio can actually give you a resistance to the sleep and all other debuffs, and that resistance amount he can give is actually quite a bit. It's, I think, 40%. Yep, 40% resistances he can grant you against debuffs. So if her amount that she can do is 50% based off of whatever your faith or whatever is, then that drops down to 10%. And if you have low faith, you're probably guaranteed to be immune to it at that point. Apparently Balio's TMR adds 25% sleep resist, so you could add that to whatever units you currently have. Also, as a side note, the following units here are immune to Siren's sleep. So these ones are completely immune. These ones are not, though. Well, he isn't. Venera might actually be, and Yerma and Katone probably are as well, because it did say following units. So those are all units that are immune to it, which can be useful, you know? Because once you get knocked to sleep, your person will just have their turn used and wasted, which is probably one of the worst things to happen in raids, is when, you miss a turn or you end up dying and then your dead body takes up like 3 turns. So this is if you have 50 faith and 25 sleep resist. That is the formula right there. So 30% chance of being put to sleep. So it's still high even if you have low faith. So that buff from Mustadio will be really nice, because it'll basically stop you from getting put to sleep. And as a bunch of missile rangers, you shouldn't have max faith on them unless you are going for specific debuffs, like Mustadio can debuff quite a bit, so you might have him built like that. So that would be the recommended missile ranged team, just because those would do the most damage, and you'd be able to build those combos up really fast with their quadruple shots. Mustadio even has a double shot. Or no, it's a triple shot, I think. Quick shot does 3 hits, so, 2 units do those, and then 2 other units do, like, any kind of large shot, and you're probably doing max damage to this raid boss with them. And of course there is the slash teams, even though she is resistant to slash. At this point in the game, slashing teams are the most prevalent. They're the ones you see most often, and they have the most cards really to buff them, and the most everything, because they are the highest amount of like attack type in the game. The people here that they recommend are Venera, because her armor cleaver and limit burst can do that, but she's also really good. You could sub her into a missile composition if you don't have a lot of missile people and you're doing it solo, because her sub as a gunner is pretty good. Her highest hit combo in the sub is her dual shot, I believe, which just hits twice, but it does do large damage, so she could be the one hitting for the damage in your team as they build everything else up. Now, Orlando's, of course, he can use Crush Armor, and he's just going to be used no matter what, because he is still relevant and probably always will be with all of the abilities he has and the buffs he's gotten. Yerma is recommended because she can use Trinity Break. So this boss isn't immune to speed breaks. Siren isn't. Glacial is immune to speed breaks and all that. So for Siren, I would recommend units that can do speed breaks. Katone can use triple slash, which Katone can and Shadowlynx both can. So you could use either or, because Shadowlynx is available to everyone. So if you are going with the slash comp, those two are viable options. And Glacial can use her slash sub job. I haven't looked too much into her, but she is one of the water units I'm going to be building up later on. So her slash sub job is not bad. Now, as for other slashing people, I would recommend Schultz, because he is the right element, but also because he does have all the debuffs that you might want. He has the speed break, the magic break. As for combos, he doesn't really have huge combo building power, but he can be your tank. You could put Vow of Love on him, and the Knight subclass on him will have the slash debuffs and everything that you want with him. So that would be the one. But he also does have the potential to be your tank in your ranged unit because his other class is Ranger. Now you throw Vow of Love on him, he won't be doing the most in that kind of situation. He'll mostly be sitting there with Vow of Love and aggroing the boss for the first little bit while your squishy, Rangers dish out a lot of damage, but he does have a couple abilities like Supercharge and that will do a large amount of damage if he's the last one in the chain to hit. Not a bad choice for that kind of a situation. So he's definitely good. Other ones that you could potentially use if you don't have Schultz, which, let's be honest, most people probably don't. Ravenessa, I know my one friend has her maxed out. She could be a viable tank as well. She doesn't have the best debuff abilities. I don't believe she actually has Speed Break or Magic Break on her skill kit. And O as well, he could be used in a slash comp just because he does have the element advantage. He may be able to hit and do quite a bit of damage. I would only recommend these two like as a last resort if you're trying to fill empty spots on a slash team and you don't have anyone but these two because they were the ones you raised up. I wouldn't suggest building them up starting now. They're more use them if you have them and you don't have any of the other better options for that. Okay. Now, of course, recommended vision cards, Frederica's Dream, which has the highest missile attack up. That's always a good choice. Ifrit, you can't go wrong with, and then Vow of Love, of course, for, the attack up, but also for the fact that it could put the hate up on your tank. You definitely want that. Two-Headed Dragon, it's the best at raising damage, but it's not the only one that you can choose here. You could also go with, I believe it is Mind Flayer, Bursting Spirit Mind Flayer. The only difference between the two at max is 500 damage. So the Mind Flayer raises it by 2,000, the Two-Headed Dragon raises it by 2,500. I'll be using the Two-Headed Dragon just because I have it at 3 stars, whereas the Mind Flayer I have at like 1 star, so it wouldn't make sense. But you might have Mind Flayer much higher than that, so it's a good option to do. Of course, Signs of House Beloved, not everybody has it. I don't have it, I really wish I did. Agility up in any kind of a raid situation, that is a huge bonus. It's not the only agility card. In a previous video, I went over a bunch of different agility type cards. You could consider using those, but honestly, you're going to already have a slot taken up by Frederica's Dream or another missile type attack up one that you have. Or you'll have a slot taken up by Ifrit. Well, you'll probably have Ifrit in your solo comp no matter what because of the damage up. You could also have Vow of Love, and there's a couple other just pure attack up cards that you can add to your party that are also fairly decent. In fact, there was a free card, and I'm going to actually look that up. Okay, War of the Visions Crash. That they gave us all, and I can't remember the name of it right now. But it also gives a fair amount of attack up, and it was easy to max out. Most people probably do have it. For a slashing team, of course, Echoing Screams is good. I don't use Echoing Screams. I use Secret Agent. Which one is that? I'll actually open up my vision cards, give a couple more of those recommendations. Because there are other options that you can choose between these ones that are more viable for you. Dashing over a snowy field for piercing or glacial teams. I don't have that leveled up at all, but you know what? If you're going with a pierce heavy team, you can do it. This would most likely, I would only recommend doing, this if you're probably duoing or teaming up with someone else who is also going to be doing this. Like, 3 or 4 people decide to use Glacial and you have those friends, then go ahead, use this. Otherwise, I wouldn't really recommend it. I don't have Exorcist, and I don't really think it would be the best card. In the guide here, it is kind of recommended that you could make it work, but it doesn't sound very promising. Now, as for Espers, these are the recommended ones. However, we all know that with Espers, as far as it goes, whoever you have leveled up, those are the ones you should be using. I would not recommend using weaker cards that are weaker Espers just because they're the ones you have. So Secret Orders is another slash up one. It's not as strong, but it does add the 10% agility up, which would help you keep those combos going. But it does give you the spirit down, which this boss uses mostly magic, so it makes you even more squishy on a pretty squishy unit. So Vow of Love is also huge card to use because of the hate up, but it does add slashing as well. So if you are using this on Schultz, you would have slash up, but mostly I would recommend using this on a tank to take the damage away from your missile units. That would be the ideal choice there. This is also another one that it's not a bad card to have. It's Mythic Rare, Sharpen Concentration, missile attack up a bunch. Again, it does have the negative side effect of the Spirit Down, which is bad for this specific raid. But at the same time, the attack you would have up goes to your whole party. So you could even say, equip this to a tank and just let them get hit a little bit harder. Now for the free card, so this is the Mind Flare card. And as you can see, I don't have it up very high at all, but it still gives a good little chunk. It's not bad to have. And probably have that card higher level. Actually, I think I maxed it. Just because, yeah, this one here was given to everybody and you just had to create the bingo board. It's 30% attack up. If you don't have Ifrit, that's always a good card to have for just raising your party's damage. You could slot that one in instead. So for the Espers, the recommended, of course, Tetra Sylphid, Missile Attack Up, Fenrir. The Esper Killer bonus on this one does help quite a bit, and it gives you magic resistance. Now for a piercing one, Ifrit is great, because Pierce Attack Up. Siren is also good because she has water resistance. And Ramu has Water Killer. Now I will repeat this again. If you do not have these guys leveled up and say you only have them at 40, it would still be better to use your Espers that you have fully leveled, because not only fully leveled, but resonanced. Because a fully leveled Esper has these kind of stats, whereas if you just go over a couple and you get to the single stars, they have a noticeably lower amount. And when you have the resonance at 100%, well, that's good, because then you get 100% of the Esper stat bonus to your character. So even a level 38 Ochu is better in some situations than a second star like Esper that you have no resonance for. But you will not beat the double starred, like double awakened, Esper that has full resonance. Even if it gives you the missile attack up, it's not going to be worth it to equip a Tetrahede Sylphid. In fact, I have a Tetrahede Sylphid. I just got her, but because I just got her, she's level 1. So if I equipped this onto my person, leveled it up a little bit, it still wouldn't come close to a max, leveled fucking anything else. Even if I put Ifrit on my gunner, he doesn't have the, missile attack or anything else, but he would be better on my gunner than a low-level Tetrahede Sylphid. So definitely pick the ones you have that are leveled up. You can't really grind these Espers because they just give you the materials so slowly. So this is the theory that Meow, who has kindly put together this guide. And if you haven't checked out warofthevisions.info, I would suggest it. It does have a lot of useful little information. It doesn't have everything. You kind of have to go around to all the different sites and, Reddit and everywhere to try to piece it together. For the Glacial raid, there isn't even a lot there, really. But the theory here is a mix of Frederica with Niv. and all of the bells, because everybody just loves the bells. You could just be a trash player, but as long as you have bells, you probably won't be kicked from any of the rooms, no matter what. And you'll definitely see these because these are the two best units. Even if you have only Frederica, you probably won't be kicked from any of the teams because she is the number 2 choice in this team. If you are kicked as Frederica, it's probably because you're trying to join a room of people who just want like Stern or Orlando. If you're getting kicked from a room and you're Frederica in a room with a Niv, well, then the guy you're trying to join is just an idiot. And that's not your fault. You can't help other people like that. But Frederica definitely is your number 2 choice. 1 Orlando, probably because he has the Thunder buff resist down ability. And you'll see that lots of people will value that because it'll do huge amounts of damage. 4 Venera with missile subjobs with bells. That's kind of an interesting thing if you see that. I have Venera, so at least I have a choice for throwing something in here. I'll show you all the units I have. I'll go over what my current plan is as well. And 4 Orlandos because you can't stop that. 4 Glacial with Bell. She can equip Tide Ring, increasing her water resistance. So that wouldn't be the worst composition either. And Yerma with 3 Lucias and with bells. Pretty much everything you see on here is all with bells because that is what people value most. Personally, I think you can get away without bells on a lot of things, but the bells, they do help. There are 2 other options here. Glacial's armor, as well as Oldoa's little waistcloth also gives AP, so those are good. So it doesn't really have a slash and comp mixed together, but you can get away with, you know, Schultz and a bunch of the other slashers that you have and just pick the cards that give slashing up and all the right buffs for your team, like Ifrit, Echoing Screams, Aegean. So the map's going to be just a standard, simple map. And the reward is going to be this Elf Cloak. Its defense and that aren't too bad. The big thing it does give you is the confusion resistance, which later on could be incredibly useful in any kind of a raid or event where they're going to have a lot of confusion using enemies. And the 10% pierce on an accessory. If you combine that with the current event reward that we get, the helmet that also adds pierce resistance, these effects do stack, so you could potentially create a unit that will never again have to worry about Canes and can easily just take whatever damage he dishes out at you and laugh at them. So if you combine that with a max +5 helm from this raid and you have this on them, and who knows what the other weapon you'll have on that character as well. Later on there might be even a weapon that provides pierce resist, which would make it so you wouldn't have to worry about Kane ever again. I'll be aiming to get this one somewhat high up so I can, you know, add on to my Agrius not only a pierce resist. This, I may also equip her with a +5 pierce resist helmet just to deal with the fact that she's not very strong against piercing attacks right now. It does have highest hit point for an accuracy or accessory, which is 640. That is actually really high for an accessory. And then evasion and defense are high as well for it. The evasion, total of 14. That's not so bad. The crit avoidance doesn't really matter at all. But 14 evade is pretty good. There are better accessories for the evasion if you're going evasion. I wouldn't recommend picking this for the evasion type. I would suggest if you are getting the Elf Cloak and you're getting it maxed out, put it on a tank. And I would go with the hit point one out of those. Or if you aren't going to have a separate armor piece, the defense on it is pretty high up there. So you could build a even +5 helmet of the Spirit Resist version that we currently have and just go defense, or you know what, just go defense on both. You still get a little bit added on. It's up to you really with your character build. It's a fairly decent item though, so it's worth farming. Anything that gives pierce resistance is nice, especially since it's the only one currently that does give that. Of course, crit avoidance is not very useful. Fusion resist will be incredibly niche, I guess. So yeah, it's not very useful, but if you do come across a raid later on, you might have a boss that uses confusion a lot, just like the Siren boss uses sleep quite a lot. I would check out this information here. It's a very good source to go to. Now, on to the second part of this, which is the Glacial raid. And this is where I get my information for most of this raid, and from watching several of the videos, just the War of the Vision standard one here. So it will have 3 specific rewards, which is quite a few. The Soul of Thasma, which I am looking forward to because I missed out on this the last time it was available. And it's going to give you a large amount of attack, magic resist, and magic piercing resist. And of course the silence is also nice, but the best part is of course the magic version of 120, and since stats do stack, it will be very good to have. The Brigandine, it's not too bad. The area attack resistance up is great for any kind of magic casters, and a lot of the newer units that come out have huge area attacks that do a lot of damage, so that is going to be very useful. It does have 20 defense, which is huge. I wouldn't recommend the Spirit version, even though it might be useful against it. I think this would be better with the 20 defense up, and you find an accessory that gives you a bunch of Spirit and put that on your character if you want them to be super tanky. I think this item will be more useful against all the physical units that are coming out that just have the huge AoEs, such as, you know, Ruin Knight Stern or Dwayne. Like, they just have large AoEs that do a huge amount of damage. Now this is going to be pretty good for any kind of evasion type units, as well as a bunch of others. And it'll be very useful for the light resistance, because there are going to be units that are newer, that are light, such as Yuna, that will deal massive damage, so the 10% light resist, great. The evasion, it's also really good. Now, this right here, 29 evade, that's massive evasion, so that's a really, really nice item for any evasion heavy team. So that's also, like, unfortunately all 3 of those items are very nice. You're probably going to have to pick and choose which ones, because most likely you're not going to be getting every single one. So the team comps for that, mostly it's weak to fire and slashing. So slashing, no problem there. You could do that with basically any of the teams you're probably using for this raid here currently. You could end up taking to this boss and still do good. So you don't have to, whenever the boss is resistant to slashing, worry too much about your units. Now, the fire resistance is also really nice. I have a friend who has one of the main characters I'm going to recommend for this fight, and he's fire. There hasn't been a lot of fire resistant or weak bosses or events, so they've kind of been not getting a lot of love that they should be. So he'll be very happy with that. As for debuff resistances, as you see, it is resistant to everything, and no agility debuffs at all will work on it. So unfortunately, speed breaks, slows, all that, and I don't know why, but if you wanted to haste it or quicken it, you can't do that either, but I don't see why you would even have to do that. Now, it does have accuracy up, and it does have hit point debuff resistance plus percentage. It doesn't actually say how much specifically, but it just has the percent plus. And that's all the information you can really get from this site here specifically. Now, I've watched a couple videos, seen how the comps work, and I have a couple recommendations for the units. Of course, fire units, a pure slashing team. The number one ones I would be recommending, of course, are Delita. That is my one friend's unit. He offers the highest fire resistance down, and it doesn't say whether you can debuff their resistances, but you have been able to in every other raid, so I'm assuming you'll still be able to. That's just an assumption though, I could be wrong on that, but his debuff is 48% fire resistance down. So even if you aren't using him in slash composition, you may just want to include him in your 4-person party with any of these other, fire characters, just for the fact that he basically guarantees you're going to be doing massive damage with that fire resistance down debuff he does. And of course, that's not all. He does have a couple other attacks. He can do a couple combos. I think his ultimate is a 2-hit combo, so he can build it up a little bit, and he does massive damage on his own. Not the tankiest, but he does hit incredibly hard, especially against units who are weak against fire. Second unit I would be recommending, Summer Katone. She has Ice Eater up on one of her attacks when she uses it, and it is a slashing type attack. She is a magic user, but can equip a subclass that gives her access to slashing and gives her access to Ice Eater, I believe plus 25%, which is still really good. So basically these two work great together. King Mont will be coming out at the same time this Glacial is, or before. I'm not quite 100% sure on the timeline of that, but he is one of the units people are using against Glacial, so I'm pretty sure he will be out at the same time as this raid is out, or just slightly before this raid comes out. His attacks, well, he is just all around really, really strong. He also does have a 3-hit combo if you put his subclass as Ninja, so he could be your combo builder, as well as just his regular abilities are very damaging and strong. Now the next one I would recommend for your 4th is going to be Rain. So these are the 4 I recommend: Rain, Delita, Summer Katone, King Mont. Rain, he is very good just for being a tank. I was going to recommend him for the speed break he has, but that's not really an option because he can't do that. But he can add up his own ice resist, and he can build combos. So those are the things he is useful for as well. And you could put Vow of Love on him specifically because he'll be able to tank it better than the other 3 units. Maybe not better than King Mont. I'm not 100% sure on that. But Rain is definitely able to increase his ice resist by 25%, which makes him much more survivable against this raid boss. Now that's what I would recommend for slashing, just because they're the best. You can of course sub in whoever else you have for slashing into that and just do a slashing strike, but if you're going for easy solos, those 4 are definitely your highest picks. Now, if you're duoing this with a friend, you could even go with Piercing, because Piercing isn't a huge amount of an increase. I would recommend Old Leonis and Christmas Masher if you have those 2, and you duo with another 2 that have the exact same, then you'll be probably very easy to get through this boss. It won't be that hard. They're, fairly strong. Fire piercing is only slightly reduced. I would not recommend magic units. And I know Rain is a magic unit, but he's also able to just be your tank and your slash combo booster for your other units. But the magic resistance this boss has is much larger than the other resistances, so I would not recommend them. Plus, there's not a huge amount of magic users. Katone as well. I realize 2 of the units I recommended now as your top slashers are also magic users. But besides these units for fire and magic, there isn't actually other fire or magic units. Now, of course, you can make your composition for however you want. As long as it has a lot of slashing, it'll be probably really good against this boss. If you are going with a full fire team, you'll breeze through it. These are the cards I would definitely recommend having. The area resistance up, because of course this boss will have that. Increased attack. So these are just for your unit. The party buff, the extra 25% health helps a huge amount. And this is another, maximum damage boosting card. I wouldn't specifically recommend seeking this card out unless that's your plan to begin with. You don't have to have it for this raid. You can use other max damage increasing cards like Two-Headed Dragon or even the Mind Flayer card. Those both work as well, but it does add a nice chunk of resistances. The debuff defense, it's kind of a minimal buff, really. It's a large percentage, but it's not something you really want. 25% hit point, you could also achieve that with a Golem card. This is just a card, if you do have it, it is nice enough to go into your slot just for the extra damage and the hit point. But you can simply replace this with different cards if you don't have it. Ifrit, I'm going to say, is a must-have if you are going with it, and I do believe it will have these effects out by the time this raid is out. That's not 100%, but I believe we're getting all these extra buffs, in a couple months, around probably when this raid comes out. So if we do, this ice resistance raises your survivability a large amount, and if you top that off with your character's own ability to raise their ice resistance, it's going to be very hard for that raid boss to kill your party. And of course, the 50% attack, you can't go wrong, and whatever fire unit you throw that on gets even more. So that's a must-have card for that. If you don't have this, though, again, Vow of Love on your tank, still very good option, still very usable. Now, I'm not 100% sure when this card is coming out, so it might come out after this raid. I just noticed it here in War of the Vision Calc, so it might be a brand new card. It's still a card to look out for if you are building a fire-piercing comp, which there is honestly not that many fire-piercing characters out there. There is, of course, Xmas, Masher, and the old Leonis. If you can get this card maxed out for those two and you duel with someone else, this is a huge increase to basically everything you need. It gives piercing attack up 35, that's large. The dexterity, which helps you out, for attacks, hits, dodging, and some damage. Not a lot, but it's still a nice bonus to have. And the 20% magic resist. I do believe this Glacial will be using magic, so that's adding to your survivability, and whichever unit you equipped it on gets a 15% hit point buff, which is nice. It is a very specific card, though. So if you aren't planning to have a Pierce team, I would not go for it, just because of the simple fact it is fire only and it is heavily more for piercing. If you don't have a piercing unit, the 18% dex and the 20% magic resist, you can get that from other locations, from other cards. And honestly, this is large, it's nice. Don't seek it out if you aren't planning to have a fire piercing 3s team. I don't even think there is a third fire piercer. There might be somewhere. Now this one is very nice just because of the fire attack up by 35. It's just a not bad card for this. Fire resistance doesn't really matter against a fire boss, but the fire attack up 35, it will stack with an Ifrit, for instance. So you would have a huge damage boost if you had Keepers of the Crystal and that other card, the Ifrit, maxed out. This would help you do massive amounts of damage. So at the end of the video here, I'm just going to be going over, for instance, well, my Espers I'll be using are just going to be, Odin, the Two-Headed Dragon, Golem, and Ifrit. Those will be the 4 I use in my team comp, and that's simply because they are the ones I have leveled. I have the other ones that are recommended, but they aren't leveled up, so I can't really use them. I am currently building the Resonance, so I have my units, I have my formation, So these are my 2 missile units I will be leveling up. I plan to do this duo. I'll be basically just leeching off my friend who has basically a full party of missile units, where I am struggling and I might barely get Lucia up to, 89 by the time this Siren event comes out. As for fire units, well, you're looking at your Shulta. She is my only fire unit currently, besides Rain, who I am going to be working on starting now. I don't have very many fire units, and as for electric, like Salier is my only higher level one, so I won't be using any of these other characters or the ones I recommended simply because I don't have them. I don't have enough time really to raise her up, and she isn't really a character I want personally. So I will be doing without her. You don't have to focus on her or whatever other characters that are the recommended ones. You can find a way to make it work. As for Lucia, I was planning to raise her up slowly, but because she will be very useful in the upcoming raid, I will be leveling her up as fast as I possibly can here. I'll be focusing more on her on the shards, because as long as I can get just enough shards here, 102 more before Siren comes out, I'll be able to, at least have her up to 89. The big bonus she gets is her quadruple shot, which will build that chain up a huge amount, so I can probably still get really far in the raid with her being lower level. And whoops, I exited out of that. My other gunner will be the Mustardio, because I was planning to level him up, and I had him almost max awakened. All because he does have this gun here, and that was the main reason I was going to get him up, because whenever I did get a gunner unit, I don't have any actual guns, so I was just going to equip them with this. So I'll probably have this equipped onto him and bells on my Lucia, and that'll be how I do it. He'll do some serious damage, and my Lucia will build up the combos, and my friend will carry me with his Nivlov and Lucia, or his Nivlov and Frederica. He basically has a full team of gunners where I barely have any, so it'll be very hard for me to get through the Siren event easily, but I can still probably manage to get through the majority of it. The solo portion of it, I can even probably just take my slash team and get my rate up high enough so we can duo it up to 80. And then as long as I have a high enough raid, I can host level 80s with maybe my Mustard or my Lucia, and just like get the other people to join, have Nivlov, and I'll basically just support with this character and try to get through it. As for the Glacial raid, my fire units, as you see, Rain will be probably the only one I do have fully ready for that. I may get Summer Katone and I may level her all the way up, because she's also going to be a magic unit, and I could use that in my magic team I will be building eventually. So I might have 2 of those units as well, and my friend is also way more set up for the fire units as well. He has Delita, he has a couple fire units like maxed out, so he'll be doing really good on that event too, so I'll probably just try to focus on my Rain, get him all the way up, and I'll set him up as a tank. And then I'll have Summer Katone also dealing massive damage, and that'll be my plan for that raid. I can't really do much else besides that for preparing, but as long as you know that it's coming up, you can prepare for it. So I would recommend starting to look at the units you're thinking of raising, and whichever units are more useful for the upcoming raids, start building them now while you still have time, because when the raid comes out, we all know your time's pretty much up to level those people up. And that's my video on pretty much what to do next. So hopefully you guys liked it. Hopefully it helps you figure out and decide what you want to do.